Show.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. Billionaire Democrat donor Tom Steyer is spending millions of dollars to run ads urging Trump's impeachment. And now he says Fox News has censored his impeachment ad. Steyer says he ran the impeachment ad during Fox and Friends, but the ad was then pulled off the air without warning. Steyer says he has hired Bernie Sanders lawyer Brad Deutsch to defend the free speech right to run the impeachment ads. Here's a portion of the impeachment ad Steyer says Fox is censoring.
He's brought us to the brink of nuclear war, obstructed justice at the FBI, and in direct violation of the Constitution, he's taken money from foreign governments and threatened to shut down news organizations that report the truth. If that isn't a case for impeaching and removing a dangerous president, then what has our government become?
Steyer says Republican members of Congress once impeached a president for far less. Steyer is urging Americans to speak up for impeachment because he says Trump is a clear and present danger. And Steyer says Republicans know it, but aren't doing anything.
People in Congress and his own administration know that this president is a clear and present danger, who's mentally unstable and armed with nuclear weapons, and they do nothing.
United Teachers of Los Angeles are demanding that LAUSD school board member Ref Rodriguez resign and recuse himself from voting to approve or deny charter school petitions Tuesday, November 7th. UTLA says Rodriguez co-founded a charter school network called Partnerships to Uplift Communities, and there may be conflicts of interest involving Rodriguez and $285,000 in payments that he allegedly authorized when he was a senior executive at PUC. UTLA cited various conflicts of interest and criminal charges, including perjury and conspiracy tied to a money laundering scheme, as reasons for their demand that Rodriguez resign from the school board. UTLA says the CEO of Netflix made a $75,000 contribution to Rodriguez's legal defense fund. Ref Rodriguez faces criminal charges from alleged money laundering in his 2015 school board campaign. WIN is America's multimedia news voice for workers.
We will not lie down. We will not go away. We will not cower. We will not submit. Nothing will stop the will of working people when you trample on our rights.
We need to make more money. You know, what they're paying us, the greedy corporations, they just want to pay us what they want to pay us, and it's not right.
We are sick of an economy and a democracy that are rigged against us.
Support WIN's worker news mission at workersindependentnews.com. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here tonight on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Virginia, New Jersey, two more Democratic governors projected winners. Phil Murray there in New Jersey and Ralph Northam there in Virginia. And look, The exit polling, very clear. Health care being one of the big issues. Oh, and by the way, a tax scheme to benefit the wealthy just days before election time. Who was the bright genius who goes, hey, let's put this steaming pile of... Who's in the brain trust who said, yeah, we're going to put out a tax plan that's going to benefit the 1% overwhelmingly over the working stiffs who have been getting screwed by this economy? Who thought that up? I would love to know. But again, healthcare front and center in all of this, especially in Virginia, where, we had talked about this yesterday, where you have got a couple 100,000 people going to the polls going, look, we've got a governor who wanted to expand Medicaid in McAuliffe. You've got the Republicans who have done everything they can do to block it. You had the Gillespie guy saying, no, we're never going to do it. Ran one of the worst race-baiting campaigns that I have seen, and good for him, a good public beating, which he deserves. But here's the thing. It comes back to the same exact issues that we've been talking about for years in this program. And, as much as I'm not a huge Bill Clinton fan, he's right. It always comes back to the economy, stupid. It comes back to healthcare. It comes back to those kitchen table issues that families deal with each and every day. And am I surprised New Jersey and Virginia? No. With Chris Christie with a 19% approval rating, come on. The Republicans were doomed for a beating there, and good on them. The other thing that I'm watching is the race out in Washington State, where you've got a state Senate seat that could tip the balance of power. That's going to be interesting, and that'll be a couple hours down the line. We'll see how that comes out. But here, this morning, and this is one of those moments where you go, this is what the Trumpites do. This is what Trump and his administration have done. You can go down the list of all of the people that they've put in charge of departments or agencies that they are antithetically opposed to the mission of the agency. You look at Rick Perry, wanted to do away with energy. You look at Pruitt at EPA, has sued the EPA a number of times. You look at, billionaire Betsy, who really doesn't have a clue, and hopefully soon she'll be out the door. But you can go down the list of all of the people that he's chosen, that Donald Trump has chosen to lead organizations that, they're clueless. But I look at this morning, and this morning was another one of those moments where the Department of Health and Human Services, the HHS, they rolled out their new criteria for evaluating states who want to change their Medicaid programs. Because, look, we're sold on this idea that the states are the laboratories of innovation, and states are going to do all these wonderful things. And yet what we find time and time again is, especially when you're talking about programs for the poor and the aged and the vulnerable, it's usually about how we make things worse rather than better. But there are going to be some changes, and not surprisingly, it's going to be a disaster for the most vulnerable in our society. I don't even know that I have to explain it, because it's been that bad all along. And as with anything, it comes down to the language that they use and the ideology that they keep pushing on us. In the past, what's happened is, in order for states to make changes, they had to prove that, the changes would be positive, that they would, quote unquote, increase and strengthen health coverage for the people who, don't have sufficient incomes to be above the poverty line or the Medicaid line. So the idea was, we want to make sure that people get the care that they need. That's evidently gone. No more high road, let's make things better, let's try and figure out how to help. No. What we're looking at is more like, let's kick them. Let's kick them while they're down, because, hey, they're down there anyway. So here's what we're going to see. And look, this, again, nothing surprising here. It is what the Republicans have been pushing for a very long time. It is their ideology, and we shouldn't be surprised that now that they have the reins of power, this is where they're going. Work requirements are coming for people on Medicaid, yet, most of the people who get Medicaid benefits actually are already working. They want to drug test people who are on Medicaid so that we can kick them off They want to put a whole bunch of these other roadblocks in the way. And look, we know what these roadblocks are about. They're designed to frustrate. They're designed to anger. They're really designed to put roadblocks in front of people so that they can deny coverage. And the reality is, you go, sound familiar? Of course it does, because it's the GOP MO. It's what they do. So this morning, they have this statement by Seema Verma, who's an administrator there at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And she called the goal of covering more people, making sure that people who need the coverage get it, she called it a hollow victory of numbers. And I go, hollow victory? Really? Now understand, this is the constant GOP attack line. They argue that, well, just because we're covering more people doesn't mean the program's working. In fact, what they actually claim is the fact that so many people are being covered, they see as a failure by the program. And look, it could be argued that having so many desperate people in need of public assistance is a failure. We could argue that. I would argue it's a failure of economic policy to provide enough jobs, enough high wage jobs with, health care and so on. That, of course, not their argument. Their argument is simply this. There are too many moochers and they're lazy and they need to get out and get jobs. You hear this nonsense all the time. And the thing that gets me is, according to the statement, the new metric is simply going to be to reduce federal regulatory burdens, increase efficiency, and to promote transparency and accountability. Yay! Here's the thing, the real world reality. If I'm reading this statement right, people are going to lose coverage. We know that because people are not going to be able to find jobs. So Verma's statement reads, quote, "Every American deserves the dignity and respect of high expectations. As public officials, we should deliver programs that instill hope and say to each beneficiary that we believe in their potential." She goes on to say CMS believes that meaningful work is essential to beneficiaries' economic self-sufficiency, self-esteem, well-being, and health of Americans. Here's the reality. First, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, a study they came out with in 2017, only 27% of Medicaid recipients are adults without disabilities. 60% of that group are already working. They're low-waged workers who work in crummy jobs that don't pay enough to get them above the poverty line. And the reality is, when you sit and you look at the reality, you look at the facts, and I know it's so much easier to say, lazy moocher. The facts are what they are. And we've got a lot of problems, and a lot more coming, because we do have a serious problem. And I'm somebody who believes in work. I believe, everyone should have a job. I believe everyone has a right to work. I believe all of that. A right to a job at a reasonable wage with, family-sustaining benefits, all of that stuff. That to me is the right to work. You go down to the whole thing. The work is therapeutic, all of that stuff. But the reality is the free market is not going to create enough jobs. It's not creating enough, be it for whatever reason. Whether it can't or it won't, that's of no consequence. It's the fact that they're not. And as I've always said, look, if they're not going to, we the people, through our government, have to. So, instead of, this kind of baiting and this kind of nonsense, wouldn't it be smarter to say, let's figure out how we make sure that people get coverage, make sure that there's a safety net under all of our feet? Because guess what? Guess what's coming? A loss of about half of all the jobs we currently do. And the question is, what does the future look like? And when we come back, I'm going to talk about what does the future look like? Will we see a new deal? What's the future of work in this country? What's the future of a social compact? Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Disorder in the house. There's a flaw in the system. And the fly in the ointment's gonna bring the whole thing down. Floodgates are open. We've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken, and we've fallen for the ruse.
I'm Rick Smith, And this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1959. That was the day that the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a decision that would be a blow to the cause of labor. Striving for the kind of major gains they had won in 1956, the 500,000 members of the United Steelworkers of America once again went out on strike. The steel industry was extremely profitable, and the workers demanded to share in the fruits of their labor. Management wanted the ability to introduce new technology and policies to cut hours and employees. The strike wore on for more than 100 days. President Dwight D. Eisenhower ordered the steelworkers back to the plants. He argued that the Taft-Hartley Act gave him the legal means to issue the order. A decade earlier, Congress had passed the Taft-Hartley Act over President Harry Truman's veto as a way to curtail union rights. The steelworkers protested the constitutionality of the law all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The union lost. In making its decision, the court referenced President Eisenhower's explanation of the impact of the strike, writing, quote, "The strike has closed 85% of the nation's steel mills, shutting off practically all new supplies of steel. Over 500,000 steel workers and about 200,000 workers in related industries, together with their families, have been deprived of their usual means of support. Present steel supplies are low, and the resumption of full-scale production will require some weeks. If production is not quickly resumed, severe effects upon the economy will endanger the economic health of the nation." The next January, the union and management signed a new contract. The workers won a 7-cent an hour raise, a new automatic cost of living adjustment, improvements in their pension and health care benefits, and job protections against proposed automation.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, rain shed a farm red. Father, son, left to carry on, blue denim, had his vein. Oh, he's a working class man.
Check out the website, smithshow.com. So, one of the things we've been talking about for a long time is, a new deal. Is it possible that we can recreate what it is our grandparents' generation fought, bled, and died for? Look, you look at the labor struggles of the 20s and 30s that gave way to a prosperous working class of the 50s and 60s, with high union density and good wages, one income supporting a family. And look, there's a lot of us who look back at those and go, maybe those are times that we can recreate. Understand, the job market nowhere even close to what it was back then. But the reality is having a voice on the job, I think, is really important. And that question of partnerships, how do we move forward in society to where we don't have the kind of division we have today? And I would argue politically we're where we are because of the mass inequality and the lack of workers' ability to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions. And here to talk about maybe how we do some of that is Thomas Koken. He is the co-director of the MIT Institute for Work and Employment Research. Also has a new book, a handbook, more of a college textbook, if you will, Shaping the Future of Work, a handbook for action and a new social contract. Thomas, thanks for taking time for us.
I'm delighted to be here, Rick.
So I look at this and the idea of recreating that social contract where if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead, to me seems like something we should be, as a society, really pushing full headwind forth on.
Oh, absolutely. And the vast majority of Americans are calling for this. They're worried about their future. They're particularly worried about their children or maybe their grandchildren's future. And they don't see that positive scenario playing out. And they're saying, let's start working together to make it happen. But let's do it in a modern way. We can't go back to the old days. We're not going to create a lot of the jobs that were lost. So let's really focus on how we make sure we use technology, we use good education, and we use the voice of the workforce rebuilt in some way to really get us going again.
Now, how do you do that in a society where right now the mindset is telling us that in order for me to win, you have to lose, Thomas?
Well, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I believe a lot of people worry about that. But we've seen over and over that a strong voice at work can create higher productivity, better service to our patients, our students, the products and services that we deliver to our customers. And so if we put the talents that we have in the workforce to work for making better organizations and then demand that the workforce gets its fair share of the productivity and improved performance that they've helped achieve, I think we'll get back on track. But that's a big if. And the only way we're going to get there is if the workforce itself starts to raise its voice and demand it.
Yeah, part of this again, and I was reading through your book, and what I like about it is it's kind of it mixes a lot of history, a lot of hope, and a lot of thoughts for the future. But it asks and does some answering of the question of where did this idea of a social contract come from, and how did our grandparents build that prosperous middle class? What I've argued is probably the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization.
Well, it came through sensible legislation, adapting from a farming economy to an industrial economy, finally in the 1930s out of a deep crisis of the Depression. It put in minimum wages, it put in Social Security, it put in unemployment insurance, and perhaps maybe most importantly, it put in the right for workers to join a union and engage in collective bargaining and have a voice at work. That combination then laid the foundation for unions to grow, and by the end of World War II, they were in a position to then negotiate a fair share of the growth and productivity that the economy enjoyed. So we had that golden age. Now, we're in a different world. We don't have just a domestic economy. We have a global economy. We have changing technologies. So we're going to have to revisit that New Deal set of principles, recognizing the same need to have a voice, to have decent labor standards, and to have practices that help to grow the economy and then share the benefits.
Yeah, I've heard that argument a number of times, Thomas, that we're in a global economy now, and all of this technology. But the reality is, and maybe you're the smart guy here, we've always been in a global economy. We've always had technological changes. We've always had these. Maybe it's a lot more. It's more rapidly happening now in front of us. But we've always had these things, haven't we?
You're absolutely right. And the difference between earlier periods and now is not that technological change necessarily is going at a more rapid rate. There are big debates about that. That's a silly debate to have. It's moving forward. It's going to move forward at a rapid pace. But we don't have the institutions and the investment so that the average worker shares in the benefits of that technology. The benefits are going to a very small number of innovators and big companies and their share owners. So we've got to redistribute power in society so that the average worker can benefit from it. And we do have to invest in more education and lifelong learning so workers continue to have the skills needed as technologies change. But the fact that it's global and the fact that there's technological change, it doesn't mean that we're helpless. We're not just pawns to this stuff. We can make some decent policies, and we can use our tax policies and our employment policies to create a more level playing field.
Yeah, we can, but the question is will we? Because look, I look at where we are right now. Next year, the labor movement is in for another major blow to its ability to represent workers and to have much say on the job, as the Supreme Court, it appears, is going to make the decision in the Janus case. That's going to basically defund most of the public sector unions. You look at the tax policies that they've come out that have heavily weighted towards the 1% and the people who are benefiting from all the technological gains and all of that. And I keep coming back to all this anger in 2016 didn't really equate to any of that policy that you're talking about moving us in a better direction.
That's because we didn't have very clear narrative and convincing story about how we could turn this around. And so people vented their frustration by voting for Donald Trump or stayed home because they didn't like either candidate.
Yeah, good point.
We've got to mobilize.
I go back to the New Deal.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff happened because we were really in the middle of a Great Depression.
Well, that's right.
I've often believed, and you can weigh in if you think I'm wrong, that none of this stuff ever really happens until there's mass desperation, and we're all kind of, the old labor saying, your head will get right when your stomach's empty. That's kind of my thought.
Well, that's the way it's happened historically, and it may take that deep a crisis again. But I do think today we have a more educated workforce. We have a more a workforce that has all this communication in front of them. We have to use the modern tools of communication to lay out for the average American family a common sense approach to helping them see a path forward and achieve a path forward. When we do that, and we have leaders that are able to communicate with the workforce in a way and listen to the workforce and then empower them to make a difference on their job and in their workplace, I think we will make some progress. So I hope we don't have to wait for a depression or another war, for God's sakes, to get there. But we've got to have something that fundamentally shakes up the population to say, enough is enough. We're not going to listen to this silly rhetoric in Washington. We're not going to listen to people who don't respect us or tell us one thing that they're going to stand up for us and then abandon us as soon as they get into power. We're going to hold people accountable for really standing up for the average American family.
I love the idea. Again, the book, Shaping the Future of Work, a handbook for action and a new social contract, written by Thomas Koken. He is a professor there at MIT. Look, I love the idea. Again, I think you're right. I think it is about the narrative. It's about having those conversations because, I think this healthcare debate should be waking people up because, we're talking with people who have been, for 30 years have seen their wages stagnate. They've seen their health care get worse. Their deductibles go up. Their premiums go up. It just seems at some point that the working people of this country have to, I don't know if revolt is the right answer, but I've been saying, when do we say that the industrial piece of the New Deal ends and that we start demanding things? Because I just don't see how corporate America is going to go, we want you to have all these things. I don't believe in the concept of a benevolent employer. There are some good ones, absolutely, but most of them care about their bottom line, and that's my thought, but I'm curious yours.
Well, we have to have enough rebalancing of power to get corporations to do the right thing. As you said, there are some employers who will do it, have done it, will continue to do the right thing, and promote high levels of productivity and good jobs. But history shows us, and our current situation shows us, not enough of them will do that until the workforce says, this is what we really want, this is what we're helping to achieve in terms of successful business enterprises and a growing economy, and now we want respect and our fair share. Just look at what's happened in a very positive way in the last couple of weeks with all of the women standing up and saying enough is enough about sexual harassment. Well, we've got to do that on a number of issues. And that came about triggered by a particular event and, visible announcement out of Hollywood. Well, that same kind of triggering event, I think, could unleash a torrent of worker interest in having a voice at work, rebuilding it, doing it in ways that were not anticipated under the National Labor Relations Act, because that act is so broken and so out of date that it's really beyond repair.
I agree.
So we've got to find new ways. And by the way, we've done some research over the last 6 months that says workers consistently want more of a voice at work, and more workers want to join a union today than ever before in the last 50 years. And the data are very clear on that we just have to give them the means to do so and a way to get there.
Now let me ask you this, because I've had some some of my more libertarian union friends say, look, we don't want laws, we don't want any of that stuff. We simply want to organize workers, and we'll take to the streets, we'll do what we have to do. Is this a matter of policy? Is this a matter of having to have laws to protect people, or is this a matter of society saying that we're going to take a stand, and we're going to embrace class consciousness, and we're going to embrace the idea that the working class of this country has rights?
Well, I think the workforce has to take a stand before we'll ever get significant change in labor law to protect them. And then we will need to update our laws to protect them and provide them opportunities to have the kind of voice at work that they want. And it won't all be adversarial if we are smart about it. We can build more engaging partnerships at work the way the Europeans do with works councils and various forms of participation, and still use mechanisms of negotiations to make sure that wages are rising fairly in the economy. So I think we can create a new system, but it's going to only happen when workers say, I don't know exactly what I want, but I know I want a stronger voice in determining how I work, when I work, and what returns to all of my creative work will produce.
Yeah, especially as we move towards more of a, I know there's the gig economy is something that keeps being thrown out there, and you see reports that half the jobs that we currently do will be gone in the next 20 years. As work changes, that has to be flexible as well, I think.
That's right, and so we have to prepare for those changes. I don't know that half of the jobs will be gone, but I do know that a whole bunch of new jobs will be created that neither you or I or anyone else can anticipate at this point in time. Right. That's the nature of history. Nobody understood that we were going to have web designers in 1960 or the great demand for computer programmers in 1950. So these things will change, and we will have a whole new generation of work that we have to be prepared, and our children have to be well prepared to engage in, and that will only happen if workers themselves have some voice in shaping the future of work, and that's why I am so determined to help raise the voice of workers in a sensible way. It might have to be in a bit of an angry way to get people's attention, but then in a sensible way to channel that anger into something that's constructive and that we all can share in the future.
There you go. Last question I've got for you. In looking at this book, because I look at this as someone who's taken a number of college courses over my lifetime. It looks like a college handbook. It looks like this could be a great course for young workers, for people to take, because in it there a lot of explanations about how we got where we are, and maybe a little bit where we need to go.
Well, I hope people will do it. I teach this course online every year. I'll teach it again in the spring. It's free. All they have to do, people have to do, is sign up for it at MITx or write to me, and I'll get you signed up. We'll teach it again from about March to May, and that's exactly why we wrote the book and why we updated it this last year, to catch up with the changes both in the economy and in politics and in the consistently changing or continuously changing nature of work.
Good stuff. I come back March, and we'll do this again so we can get people to sign up for it.
Let's do that.
I may sign up for it myself.
That would be great, and we could get all your listeners to participate.
Thomas, I appreciate the time. Great piece of work. I look forward to talking to you again.
Let's do it. Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff, Thomas Kokan. Again, the book, Shaping the Future of Work, a handbook for action and a new social contract. Highly suggested. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show for working people. Come to talk.
Say the USA is drowning in graft and lies. Say the USA and resume the ties it binds. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job you're elected for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Now a new climate report supports what scientists have said for years. The climate is changing, temperatures and sea levels are rising.
Green News Report special coverage. The comprehensive National Climate Assessment is out, with dire warnings on the impacts of climate change and hope that governments can act to reduce emissions.
Climate change is happening faster than we thought in some ways. It seems societally that maybe we're more vulnerable than we thought.
All of that fantastic news and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
If we can't talk about climate change, I guess it's finally time to have that gun control conversation we've been putting off, right?
This is your Green News Report.
Maybe if there's a hurricane made of guns, we'll finally get to have both of those talks.
Okay, Desi Doyen, after the President of the United States and all of his minions telling us that climate change doesn't really exist, the White House has now signed off on a report that finds that climate change exists and it's dire? What?
Yes, it is true. The White House did not interfere with the publication of the 4th National Climate Assessment that was released on Friday. It's congressionally mandated, a peer review report that comes out every 4 years, authored by hundreds of experts and scientists from 13 federal agencies, along with outside contributors. The report, as you mentioned, does indeed directly contradict the Trump administration's position on climate science.
And they signed off on it anyway.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
It's a dire assessment of the impact of climate change on the U.S. both today and in the future. The report explicitly states that if governments don't meet the emissions reductions targets that they have agreed to in the Paris Climate Agreement, and if we go beyond those emissions targets, then catastrophic impacts would be inevitable. The report's conclusions are not surprising, but they are grim. We are now living in the warmest period ever recorded in modern civilization. The scientists conclude that human activities, especially the emissions of greenhouse gases, are the primary cause of all of the warming observed since the 1950s. And there is, quote, no convincing alternative explanation that anything other than human activity is to blame for this unambiguous rise in temperatures. Everything from the cars we drive to the power plants we operate to the forests we destroy. The report notes that climate change impacts are already here, and that's with just a small increase in warming, and they're already creating more frequent extremes. Extreme rainfall events have increased. Higher temperatures are contributing to the rise in catastrophic wildfires and more frequent extreme heat waves. Warmer oceans are increasing sea levels and boosting damaging storm surge and flood events. Coastal cities in the U.S. are seeing 5 times as frequent coastal flooding as they did 50 years ago.
Wow, this does sound dire, though it sounds a hell of a lot like all of your Green News reports over the last 9 years.
Yes, well, thank you for noticing. The ocean absorbs about a third of humanity's carbon emissions, and that is altering its chemistry. The report finds that the rate of ocean acidification today is unmatched in at least 66 million years, and that it is already harming the U.S. shellfish industry and marine life at the base of the ocean food chain. Now, looking ahead, the real kicker in the report is the unknowns. The report says there is, quote, significant potential for unanticipated surprises. Things like compound events, multiple extreme climate events that occur simultaneously or in quick succession and overwhelm our society's ability to respond.
You mean like Hurricane Harvey, followed by Irma, followed by Maria, followed by wildfires out here in California?
Exactly. And they're also warning about tipping points where we push the climate system past some threshold or trigger self-reinforcing feedback loops that lead to even larger impacts, some of which may be abrupt and irreversible. Now, some impacts are baked in and unavoidable, according to the report, because of our failure to cut carbon emissions fast enough. We are locked into additional warming and extreme weather events and a lot of sea level rise, potentially as much as 3 to 8 feet by the end of the century. However, and this is important, all of the impacts over the next few decades and beyond depend entirely on the total amount of greenhouse gases we release globally. In an interview with PBS NewsHour, co-author of the report, Dr. Radley Horton of Columbia University, noted that because of the rapid growth of renewable energy worldwide and actions that nations are already taking, the window of opportunity is still open.
If we rapidly reduce our emissions, we're still going to get some more warming, but we can avoid those worst-case trajectories, and we can minimize the risk of what we call surprises that could lead to outcomes that are even worse than what the climate models have been telling us. If we reduce emissions, we reduce the risk of those kind of surprises.
So basically, because we caused it, we can also solve it.
That's optimistic. Have you seen us solve anything lately? For much more on that story and all of those that we couldn't get to thanks to the National Climate Assessment, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Trouble ahead, trouble behind. And you know that notion just crossed my mind. Say living like die. Living like die.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. So in talking with Professor Koken, the reality is, it's one of those things I've been saying for a long time. When does the working class of this country say, we've had enough of you-know-what? We've been screwed over. We've had enough. We've eaten enough, you-know-what, sir. Thank you. I don't want any more. When does that happen? Because, and look, I had hoped after 2008 that you would see mass mobilizations of people saying, enough is enough already. There's only so much wage theft we're willing to take. There's only so much healthcare being slashed. And one of the things that's been amazing to me, and this is, again, I'm, being 50, I remember the tail end of really strong unions. When I first started in the trucking business back in the late 80s, early 90s, 85% of the LTL, the less than truckload trucking market, was unionized. So back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was making $15 an hour with health care, with a pension, if you had had qualifying hours. The top rate was like 18 and like 1880 or something like that. We're 30 years down the road, and that same exact job now, because unions have been just decimated, is paying $14 an hour to start, with a top rate of $18 an hour, with crummy health care, with crummy pension. And you go, why is that? Well, it's because, as we know, as that bargaining power goes away, and Professor Koken talks about this, as it goes away, well, the 1%, the employer class, the producers, if you will, as they like to call themselves, they take more of the gains. And it's really this war between capital and labor. And I've talked about this a lot because you look at the healthcare thing. I remember when I first started working, you got healthcare from your employer. They gave you a little card. You went to the doctor. Your bills were paid. There was no co-payments. There were no co-insurances. There were no deductibles. You didn't pay premium. It was part of your employment package. It was part of your wage. And over 30 years, what has happened is slowly they have moved us into this mindset that everyone has to pay for health insurance. It's how it is. Everyone has to pay now. And everyone has high deductibles, and everyone has co-payments and co-insurances and networks, and you can only go to certain doctors and all of this stuff. And I keep asking this question: when do we have enough? When do we say enough is enough? When do we say stop? When do we say enough of the idea that there's a benevolent employer who gives us these wonderful things? When labor says, we're the people who brought you the 8-hour day and the weekend and vacations and all of this stuff, they did. because people fought, bled, and died for it. And I think what's happened, and the sad reality of what's happened, is we never learned the history of how we got those things. We never learned the struggles that it took to get those things. And, I remember, I guess I was fortunate because I had some old timers who took me aside and said, look, this is how you got this wage. This is how we got these working conditions. You don't ever want to give them up. And what's happened time and time again, and look, we see this all across the country. And we've been seeing it for years as employers continue to pit workers against one another and continue, to use policy to pit us against one another. They continue to make more and more. And one of the things that, Thomas Koken goes into his book is, some of the graphs that I've used in the past, where from the end of World War II, there's one in particular that I use all the time. The one that from the end of World War II up until the middle 70s, as productivity rose, wages rose. Seems simple. Seemed like a simple walking together. The more work you do, that whole meritocracy thing. The more you do, the harder you work, the more you produce, the more you make. Well, right around the middle 70s, and especially in 1980, it flatlined. It died. And it's actually going backwards to where productivity gains continue to be hoarded at the very top, and hoarded in such a way that we're never going to get to it. And, this tax plan that the Republicans are throwing out again is solidifying that hoarding. And for 30 years, we've been told, these are the smart people. They know what to do with the money. It'll trickle down. Trust us. Trust us. I'm done being trusting. Sorry. In fact, I was done being trusted about 25 years ago. So the question is as Professor Koken points out, when will people say enough? Because, I'm glad he said, look, it's going to take us. It's going to take people standing up and fighting back and taking to the streets. There are no saviors. And this was my problem with people saying, about Obama. Look, I thought Obama was a decent president. I don't think he's going to be the greatest in history, as some people have said, but I think he was okay. Didn't do an awful lot to make work life in this country better. Could have, right from the beginning, and this has always been my pet peeve, and it will always be, he could have passed the Employee Free Choice Act or something significantly better than the Employee Free Choice Act. Could have done that, but didn't. Chose to go the more political Lilly Ledbetter way, which, if you know, Lilly Ledbetter spent her entire career working, being cheated, and having her wages stolen from her, only to find out at the end, sorry, you can't sue because you should have sued, years ago. So they corrected that wrong. But my point was, how about we make sure that Lilly Ledbetter or the next Lilly Ledbetter doesn't get cheated from the beginning? Give them the ability to have a contract where everything's spelled out in black and white. There's nothing vague about that. But we didn't do that. And while I agree with the professor that we're going to need to get people, and I'm going to need to be marching in the streets, and that the New Deal era, NLRA and all that are done, I don't know we as a society are capable just yet of taking on this fight. So it's going to get much worse, and we're going to see this kind of turmoil. I could be wrong. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. Because at the end of this, he's right. It's about our children. I don't want my kids to have to fight the battles of the 20s and 30s over again. But sadly, that's where we're heading. And the more you see coming out of Congress with these tax plans and all of this stuff designed to, continue to hoard more at the top, you just kind of got to go, there's something wrong here. And I was looking at a quote today that caught my attention. A New York Republican guy named Chris Collins, Representative Chris Collins, sorry. He was pimping the GOP tax plan. He was out there. He was doing the best thing he could do. because you got to slash corporate tax rates, got to, kill the death tax. He said, and look, hey, honest. You got to give credit for being honest. He said, my donors are basically saying, get it done or don't ever call me again. And again, it comes back to this return on investment. The wealth class has taken the wages that you should have been earning into your pocket to support your family and put it into theirs to buy politicians to be able to pass laws that are making it harder for you to put food on the table. That's the reality. And you've got Collins now saying, well, they're saying, if I don't get this done, no more butter on my bread. And that quote right there, that should be something that outrages every single person in this country. Because he's admitting, look, I'm bought and paid for. He's admitting, if I don't do what my donors are telling me to do, if I don't do what the moneyed interests are telling me to do, they're going to cut me off. And I'm not going to be able to run for re-election, and I'm not going to be able to keep this cushy job, and on and on and on. And again, you look at this tax plan. They keep running out saying how this is going to be great for the middle class. I've yet to see it. In fact, Collins himself in an interview claimed that the average family is going to save $1,200. And maybe in the first year that's possible. But down the line, no. And it comes back to the basic premise that I've always come back to. Do you really think that these folks who Collins himself, a millionaire, one of the wealthiest people in Congress, do you really think he cares about somebody picking up your trash or swinging a hammer or driving a truck or punching a clock? Do you really think that they're going to pursue policies that are going to benefit them? Of course not, because they don't know any of those people. It's angering, it's frustrating, and at some point, the hope is that maybe we get our heads screwed on. Because this is one of the questions I keep asking my labor friends. 2016 showed you how angry the workforce of this country is. Workers are pissed because they were told, work hard, play by the rules, you'll get ahead. That American dream, it's not there. What are you going to do when Trump doesn't bring back the jobs and that Norman Rockwell painting, that image that we have in our head of the perfect America doesn't happen? What Trump sold during the election doesn't come to fruition. How are you going to use that anger? Because look, the anger is not going away. Because people still can't put food on the table. People are still struggling to get health insurance. People are still worried about how they're going to pay the bills tomorrow, next week, next month. And yet you've got politicians like Collins saying, hey, I got to do this, or I'll get nothing from the rich people who fund me. It's crazy. Just crazy. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Trees of green. Red roses too, I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that Lemuel Rickett Boulware died. Boulware had a notorious reputation with labor leaders. He was the vice president for employee relations for General Electric during the 1950s. He took the lead on labor for the company in 1947, a year after a 17-week bitter strike at General Electric. Determined not to have another such strike, Boulware cultivated his own brand of labor relations. He advocated doing extensive research and offering what he called a fair, firm offer at the bargaining table. This meant the company would essentially give their final offer on the first day of bargaining and hold nothing back for future negotiations. This take-it-or-leave-it approach came to be known as Boulwareism. Other companies copied his tactic. Boulware came to be regarded as a master negotiator by corporate leaders. He was known for writing internal communications to GE employees with catchphrases advocating management's position on labor issues. In 1969, at the AFL-CIO convention in Atlantic City, Paul Jennings, the president of the Industrial Union of Electrical Workers, derided Boulware's tactics. Jennings described it as telling the workers what they're entitled to and trying to shove it down their throats. Boulware once described fair share unionism as wrong in principle and bad in practice. He is credited with helping to move Ronald Reagan to a more conservative approach to labor. Reagan went to work as a spokesperson for General Electric in 1954. At the time, Reagan had been a Democrat and also president of his union, the Screen Actors Guild. During his time at GE, he moved increasingly to the radical right, especially on labor issues. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Ted Lieu. Evidently, he walked out of a moment of silence on the House floor. He said, quote, "My colleagues right now are doing a moment of silence in the House of Representatives chambers. I respect their right to do that, and I myself have participated in many of them." He said, "But I can't do this again. I've been to too many moments of silence. It's in just my short period in Congress, 3 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history have occurred. I will not be silent." And, good on him. Look, at the end of this, it is the silence. It is the shaming. The can't politicize. Yeah, you can. And now these are the moments when you have to talk about it because it is front and center. This idea, and I love the right-wing arguments about protest. And a funny, weird thing happened to me today. I went to vote. And we come out, because we take the kids with us to go voting because we want them to understand that, mom and dad vote and that it's, part of your civic responsibility. And when you become of age, you've got to go and vote. And, that whole participatory democracy thing, kind of trying to pass that along in a very positive way. But the Republican folks had their little table like they do every election. They set up camp. And, they, basically try and bribe people going in. But they had a little doll that played America the Beautiful. And, she kept trying to get my kids to, okay, press the button. And then my son, dumb enough, goes, okay, I'll press it. Just to make her happy, because that's what he does. And now she goes, okay, now you've got to sing the song. And he kind of looked at her like, are you crazy? And, I kind of looked back at her going, yeah, she kind of is. I wanted to kneel. I did. I wanted to kneel and in protest of her putting the poor bear on display. But it just was what it was. And the thing is the more we allow this kind of insanity to happen, the more we don't say anything about gun violence, the more we don't say anything about sexual discrimination and harassment, the more we allow this stuff to go on, the more it's going to happen right under our noses. And we will be complicit in it as well. The more we allow the passive aggressive amongst us to pull these kind of stunts, the more they're going to do it. So for me, good on Ted Lieu. I mean, it's about time because look, he's right. Too many of these moments of silence. Too many days of the flag at half-mast. Because, look, we're finding out that this guy actually escaped from a mental hospital and was still able to buy a gun. If this guy isn't the poster child for saying that we need mental health background checks, that we need better reporting to keep these kind of people away from guns, evidently, this guy was so crazy, he actually tried to sneak guns into an Air Force base. I mean, it's just, one of those things where you go, I get it. You think you've got the right to bear arms. But again, read the full sentence. And I know it's so 18th century, but the full sentence. Well-regulated militia. That's part of it. And the founders never imagined AR-15s. And like we said yesterday, you go down the list of all of the Aurora, Orlando, Sandy Hook, Sutherland Springs. You go down the list of all of these places. San Bernardino. You just go down the list of all of these places where someone with an AR-15 went and shot and killed a bunch of people. Do you think maybe, just a thought, the AR-15 is kind of the problem? Maybe these high-capacity magazines are kind of the problem? Just a thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back in the next hour, we're going to be talking about Russia. Lots of information around Carter Page, Manafort, Flynn, the whole cabal. Don't miss it. Right back after this.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. Billionaire Democrat donor Tom Steyer is spending millions of dollars to run ads urging Trump's impeachment. And now he says Fox News has censored his impeachment ad. Steyer says he ran the impeachment ad during Fox and Friends, but the ad was then pulled off the air without warning. Steyer says he has hired Bernie Sanders lawyer Brad Deutsch to defend the free speech right to run the impeachment ads. Here's a portion of the impeachment ad Steyer says Fox is censoring.
He's brought us to the brink of nuclear war, obstructed justice at the FBI, and in direct violation of the Constitution, he's taken money from foreign governments and threatened to shut down news organizations that report the truth. If that isn't a case for impeaching and removing a dangerous president, then what has our government become?
Steyer says Republican members of Congress once impeached a president for far less. Steyer is urging Americans to speak up for impeachment because he says Trump is a clear and present danger. And Steyer says Republicans know it, but aren't doing anything.
People in Congress and his own administration know that this president is a clear and present danger, who's mentally unstable and armed with nuclear weapons, and they do nothing.
United Teachers of Los Angeles are demanding that LAUSD school board member Ref Rodriguez resign and recuse himself from voting to approve or deny charter school petitions Tuesday, November 7th. UTLA says Rodriguez co-founded a charter school network called Partnerships to Uplift Communities, and there may be conflicts of interest involving Rodriguez and $285,000 in payments that he allegedly authorized when he was a senior executive at PUC. UTLA cited various conflicts of interest and criminal charges, including perjury and conspiracy tied to a money laundering scheme, as reasons for their demand that Rodriguez resign from the school board. UTLA says the CEO of Netflix made a $75,000 contribution to Rodriguez's legal defense fund. Ref Rodriguez faces criminal charges from alleged money laundering in his 2015 school board campaign. WIN is America's multimedia news voice for workers.
We will not lie down. We will not go away. We will not cower. We will not submit. Nothing will stop the will of working people when you trample on our rights.
We need to make more money. You know, what they're paying us, the greedy corporations, they just want to pay us what they want to pay us, and it's not right.
We are sick of an economy and a democracy that are rigged against us.
Support WIN's worker news mission at workersindependentnews.com. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
Absence works. Maybe it's the way it's being taught or the way that it's being applied out there. But the fact of the matter is, it is the best form of to teach our children.
I wanna be a cowboy, and you can be my cowgirl. I wanna be a cowboy.
Oh yeah, I think that's one of my favorite quotes ever. Honestly. It works. It's just, maybe we're just not doing it right. Maybe we're just not practicing or teaching it right. Maybe that's it. Crazy stuff. And look, I mean, there's just been so much craziness going on here lately. And I'm just kind of in one of these moments where you look at the insanity coming out of Washington, D.C., and hopefully this election cycle, tonight, for instance, you got a Democratic governor in Virginia and New Jersey, a good step forward. It's a long way back, though. I mean, you look at some of the polling being done out there. You know, Democrats aren't very popular either. Still more popular than the Republicans are, thanks to Donald J. Trump. But it's got to keep coming back to us talking to each other and figuring out how we're going to really fix some of the problems that are coming. Some of the stuff that we know is absolutely going to happen. It's amazing stuff. Now, some interesting news. I look at Howard Dean, who said that he believes Jared Kushner is going to be indicted for money laundering, and then that's the next step to the Trump family. He predicted on Sunday that Cushy was going to get indicted, which I think is good. I think it's good. I would love to see that. In fact, he said, "I'm totally confident. You know, I believe in the president." He said, "I think I'm completely confident." After NBC News reported on it, that Mueller had enough to go after Flynn and his son, Trump's National Diversity Coalition Director, Bruce Level, he said that he believes in the president. He said, "I think the whole Russia thing is a waste of time, unfortunately. We'll see how it plays itself out. We've moved on." I got to be honest. I believe that there is a lot here. I believe there is, and there has been for a long time. And you look at some of the information that's come out recently, the transcripts from Carter Page's, his testimony kind of says, look, there is some there. The fact that, I don't know, it looks like Page confirmed that the Trump campaign altered the Republican platform with regard to Ukraine. It looks like from the testimony that, there's a lot of very cozy relationship stuff going on there. And you've got to ask the question, how deep into this are they going? Someone sent me a great image of, a giant Putin playing chess with all of the Trump people, the whole campaign. And you go, is this what it is? I mean, it's really going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out over the next couple of weeks. But here's the thing that bothers me. And while I want to see perp walks, I want to see Trump and Pence, and I want to see the whole lot of them locked up. Or as Kate McKinnon on Saturday Night Live, we better get used to stripes because we better get used to wearing them. The whole lot, Jeffy, right on down. Because, again, it shows me this idea that they don't have any respect for the rule of law. They feel they're above it. This kind of global or oligarchy, or as Sanders said yesterday, this handful of people who are dictating what happens throughout the entire world. And, of course, taking all of the reward. And again, you look at this tax plan. Again, another pitch to that kind of entitlement. So much to get to, which is why when we come back, we're gonna talk with Andrea Chalupa about all of this. She's been one of the people who, in my view, there are a handful of people that I follow who have been right about this from the very beginning. And we're talking a year, more than a year ago. In fact, she's one of the co-organizers of the March for Truth, which we went out to a couple of months back. Thousands of people came out in the streets of New York City to say, look, we want to know what's going on. We want this special prosecutor. We want to get to the bottom of it. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Andrea Chalupa is going to be here, share some of her thoughts, and maybe not celebrate too much just yet.
Me and my people are ready. Me and my people are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1959. That was the day that the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a decision that would be a blow to the cause of labor. Striving for the kind of major gains they had won in 1956, the 500,000 members of the United Steelworkers of America once again went out on strike. The steel industry was extremely profitable, and the workers demanded to share in the fruits of their labor. Management wanted the ability to introduce new technology and policies to cut hours and employees. The strike wore on for more than 100 days. President Dwight D. Eisenhower ordered the steelworkers back to the plants. He argued that the Taft-Hartley Act gave him the legal means to issue the order. A decade earlier, Congress had passed the Taft-Hartley Act over President Harry Truman's veto as a way to curtail union rights. The steelworkers protested the constitutionality of the law all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The union lost. In making its decision, the court referenced President Eisenhower's explanation of the impact of the strike, writing, quote, "The strike has closed 85% of the nation's steel mills, shutting off practically all new supplies of steel. Over 500,000 steel workers and about 200,000 workers in related industries, together with their families, have been deprived of their usual means of support. Present steel supplies are low, and the resumption of full-scale production will require some weeks. If production is not quickly resumed, severe effects upon the economy will endanger the economic health of the nation." The next January, the union and management signed a new contract. The workers won a 7-cent an hour raise, a new automatic cost of living adjustment, improvements in their pension and health care benefits, and job protections against proposed automation.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
So on Monday, there were some transcripts of Carter Page's testimony released. A few things kind of jump out at you. It appears Mr. Page is confirming that the Trump campaign did alter the Republican platform with regard to their position on Ukraine. Evidently, it's the way I'm reading it. It'll be interesting to find out. Also, that he actually proposed that Trump travel to Russia. You kind of go, really? Did you think that was a good idea? Anyway, here to talk about what's going on, what we know, where things are going, our good friend, Andrea Chalupa. Andrea, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So, one big night. New Jersey, Virginia, both Democratic governors. This stuff going on, it seems maybe we're kind of heading in something of a better direction.
It is a really good night if you believe in human rights, if you believe in unions, if you believe in Medicare for all. If you believe in Obamacare, it's a really, really good night for Americans, and we're showing the world that people are waking up across the country and we're fighting back. And I'm just so ecstatic right now. You have no idea, and it's amazing that I've stayed sober this long just to talk to you.
Well, I appreciate that, but the reality is this is just a handful of elections, and what we need to see more of. Because look, the last several years have been a bloodbath for Democrats.
Absolutely, and they were very mismanaged as a party. They're very fractured as a party, and at the same time, Americans had not yet been initiated into that special club of feeling firsthand the insidiousness of just the clever sort of undermining of Russian aggression, of Putin's Kremlin's aggression. So they're very naive and caught off guard by that as well. And so it was just a perfect storm for the Democrats to just be slaughtered in 2016. But, they're making up for it now. They're organized. People are running for office for the first time. So they're taking their anger, they're taking the shock of just seeing Trump and the far right's inhumane agenda, and they're fighting and organizing and voting like their lives depend on it, because they do.
Yeah. They do. Let me ask you about since you brought up 2016 and all that. Donna Brazile came out with what some people are saying, it's the smoking gun. That Hillary Clinton and the DNC were married up. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I feel for Donna because she had an extremely difficult job in taking over the DNC. It was an organization that desperately needed a lot of work, and it was just badly managed. It was just not ready. It was not ready for one of the most important elections ever in the history of our country. And on top of that, the DNC was being aggressively attacked in an unprecedented election of cyber warfare by the Kremlin, and no one was really taking that seriously. The media, especially, the Republicans denied Brazile, and she reached out to them, in a move of solidarity to say, look, we're Americans first and foremost, and we're being attacked by a hostile regime. So she had a really, really difficult assignment. And it was something that I know that must have been incredibly traumatic to deal with, because she was under, there was a reason why Brazile, when she came out a couple months right after the election in November 2016, where she gave a speech. It was at the DNC meeting where they voted for the new members and the new party leader, where she gave a speech, commending Democrats and saying that there were members of the DNC who feared for their lives in 2016. So for her to come out and say that, that strongly indicates that she felt under very serious threat by the Kremlin cyber warfare, which nobody was prepared for. No one was taking seriously. And the reason why I emphasize that is it was obvious. My sister experienced that when she was at DNC. And I just imagine that's very, very traumatic, something very difficult to deal with on a personal level as well. But I will say in her book, I think a lot of the book is things that she had to just get out there for herself. And I think it was a very traumatic election, and I think some points were very shocking. That some things from her book where she said that they seriously considered replacing Hillary with Biden after Hillary fainted from the flu on 9/11, after showing up to the fact that Hillary even showed up with like a heavy bulletproof vest on, having the flu in hot weather in a very crowded public event, in the middle of a very tight competition with a really gross opponent that was, causing a lot of PTSD and stress for people in the country. So I think that was ridiculous that Donna Brazile fell into that trap where the media and political operatives were going crazy and saying, "Oh my God, Hillary's finished because she fainted." I thought that was a really ridiculous, sensationalized moment in the election, and I was extremely disappointed that Donna Brazile bought into that for a single second. So, yeah, no, her book has some, ridiculous moments that are rightfully being called out, but at the heart of it, we are humans, we are complex, and I do feel for her as well for the trauma she had to deal with in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, she was left a horrible task. Because, look, I was never a fan of Debbie Wasserman Schultz at all.
Oh, no. No. She overstayed her welcome in a very big way, and history will remember that.
No, I remember the moment I said, this woman's got to go. She was asked during the 2012 recall in Wisconsin whether what was going on in Wisconsin was a national issue. And she said, no, that's a local issue. And it just stopped me dead in my tracks. I'm going, this woman's clueless, got to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, she was, all the reports that have come out have pointed to the fact that she was in there for all the wrong reasons. It's very much self-serving. And it destroyed a lot of the model that Howard Dean had brilliantly set up, where you had that beautiful 50-state strategy that helped get Obama elected, where they created infrastructure across all 50 states. And that's what's really needed. Is there are progressives in every single state across our union, and you have to empower them, and you have to give them the tools, the resources that they need to take over government from the grassroots, local level, all the way to the top in their states.
Yeah, I mean, I had a bunch of people, because look, I was a Bernie supporter from the beginning. I voted for Bernie in the primary. I voted for Hillary in the general. But I've had a lot of my Bernie friends say, "See, look look, Rick, the DNC was in the bag. And I'm going, I don't know that that's really in the bag. I don't know that that's an awful lot of an advantage, to be honest, given the dysfunction that you had at the time.
That is such a good point that nobody is making. It's like, what kind of advantage can you get from a dysfunctional organization to begin with?
I mean, it just is what it is. Let's move on because, to me, the big story now is you get Carter Page, the testimony coming out. What do we learn from the pages of his testimony about him? Are we seeing, as some are saying, that maybe this is the beginning of the burying of Trump, or some are saying that it shows that he wasn't anywhere near Trump? Where are you at?
Well, I think the Carter Page testimony was proof that even Republicans in the House can be shocked. I mean, even Republicans in Congress can be shocked. Because some of the responses that they were getting from, Gowdy, some of Page's answers were just like, oh my God, are you still talking? Like, it was just sort of like the way Republicans even responded to him. Like, people were just stunned by the schizophrenia in his responses and his bizarre conspiracy theories. People were just overwhelmed, pulling from the transcript and pulling out of a lot of juicy tidbits. And it was just never-ending flow of just the most bizarre performance art imaginable from Carter Page. And it just makes no sense that this guy, doesn't have a lawyer that clearly is advising him, because he just keeps incriminating himself. Like, he just revealed bombshell after bombshell in his testimony. What he revealed was what came out was that he essentially was lured, was attracted to go to Russia, that he met with members of Putin's inner circle within the Kremlin, that he was, along with Papadopoulos, very much pushing to bring the Kremlin and Trump together, that there was dirt in Hillary Clinton. He had a really good trip. He was excited about, Ukraine, the GOP's Ukraine policy being watered down in the convention's platform. So it was just left and right. He was just being a really great gift that keeps on giving for the Mueller investigation.
Yeah. Now, at what point do you go, some of that, does it rise to the level of treasonous, or is it just stupid?
It's a lot of stupidity. I mean, it's a lot of, what it does is it just underlines what we already know, that there was definitely a quid pro quo going on. And that, of course, ties in with Don Jr. taking that infamous June 9th, 2016 Trump Tower meeting with the Russian lobbyists and, Russian lawyers. Manafort's in the room. He's already been arrested. Kushner's in the room. Don Jr.'s there. And what's on the table is essentially the discussion of, when we come to power, we will take another look at the Magnitsky Act, which Putin and the other oligarchs don't like, and we'll see about doing something about that. But you've got to give us some dirt on Hillary in exchange. So Carter Page really, strongly underlines that there was strong back and forth interest between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. What we found out from the indictment from about a week ago, that there was the campaign officials, unnamed campaign officials mentioned in the indictment, wanted lower level Trump campaign officials to go to the Kremlin so their hands remained clean. So it's reasonable to believe that those lower level Trump campaign folks were Papadopoulos and Carter Page. They were the useful idiots. They were like the drug mules, if you will, who went to Moscow and got wined and dined by people, Russian officials close to Putin, around Putin, including in the business world of Rosneft. It's hard to believe that these were just casual, chit chats. When you go to Moscow and you're somebody that has any sort of influence and is publicly out there, you're going to get treated well. That's just what happens. They take an interest in you and they see how that you could be useful to them at some point. And so Carter Page, it's reasonable to believe that he must have had quite an interesting time when he was there. I mean, he came back from his trip and he was briefing Trump's campaign advisor Sam Clovis and others, telling him about it, and promised to write a whole memo on how the trip went. And he just came back really motivated and excited, and Papadopoulos as well was really pushing to get Trump and Putin to meet. There were several emails about this during the campaign. So there was a major connection between these two, the Kremlin and the Trump campaign, during the election and after Trump won the election. They really thought that there was, a joining of like minds. They had shared interests, that they, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And we just see that repeatedly throughout this. There's a very, very strong thread of it. So I think we can all be confident that there'll be more indictments coming soon.
Yeah, I've said the other day that I think Ronald Reagan will be very happy once the Trump administration is done, because I think Reagan has the record for most people indicted in his cabinet, a record that he's held for quite some time. I think Trump's going to blow that away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he's really creating a lot of records. I think tonight had quite a few records for the Democrats. Trump drove a lot of people out to the polls tonight, and it showed in the massive, massive GOP bloodbath. So this is definitely a president that's going to give us a lot of really exciting records that we have to look forward to.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But when talking about Page, I mean, at some point, you're right. I mean, didn't lawyer up, just keeps running off at the mouth. I mean, even Roger Stone was smart enough to kind of not get back into this. When do we see all of these indictments, do you think? I mean, because look, at some point they've got to pull this guy in. I'm looking for Stone. I'm looking for Flynn, maybe Flynn Jr., maybe even Jeffy, because we found out from the testimony that Page actually talked to Sessions as well.
Yeah, no, it's a really long list of people who had to have gotten caught up in this. Just what we know, what's already been reported, is quite damning across the board. I think, you're seeing different reactions. You're seeing Manafort being obstinate as usual, like trying to push back against his bail, trying to demand more movement and whatnot. He's being so obstinate that Mueller had to do that 5 a.m. no-knock warrant raid on his home in Alexandria. So, I think people like Manafort, they're old, tough gangsters, and they have made tons of money, blood money, going against human rights. They've made their careers off of that. So I think they just simply they lack ethics, and they don't care, and they're going to try to hang on as long as they can and hope for a pardon eventually. I think that's the strategy you're seeing. But then you have Kushner, who's like a little pretty boy, and reports are saying that Kushner is panicking, and that he's obsessed with the Russia investigation, but he's trying to act normal. But he's also obsessively calling up advisors and trying to obsessively figure things out for himself. But he knows that he's on the list too, that he might win the Mueller lottery very soon. So it's really exciting times, and I think we just have to stay vigilant and stay organized and keep our eyes on the prize for 2018 and take back the House so we can start impeachment. Very genuinely start impeachment, get that going. The most surefire way to get rid of this president is by winning back the House and the Senate in 2018. And if tonight's any indication, we're very much on the road to doing that. We just have to stay focused and keep working hard.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of taking back at least the House, hopefully the Senate as well, because then I don't have to sweat so much about the Supreme Court. But I got to be honest, there's part of me that goes, I'm with you on the impeachment, but I think I'm more afraid of Mike Pence than I am of Donald Trump.
Well, who knows where Pence lands in all of this? I mean,
then we end up with Paul Ryan.
But he might be gone.
That's
the thing. Well, I don't know. Is he up for election? I don't know. Is he up for election in 2018? Yeah, he is, because Randy Bryce.
I'm hoping Randy Bryce, the Iron Stash, takes him out.
Iron Stash takes him out. Oh my God! So we have to fight for the Iron Stash to win, and then he might become president, which would be a great thing. He's a progressive candidate, strong on unions, so that would be pretty amazing. And I think so. Back to Pence, he was selected by Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort was pushing Pence to be a VP candidate, and Pence was also managing the transition team, which Paul Manafort was, which we found out later was heavily involved in and was advising. And Pence, of course, claimed that Michael Flynn lied to him. But it's kind of hard to believe that, when Pence is managing this transition team, that Mike Flynn goes off and calls the Russian ambassador 5 times in a single day when Obama dropped sanctions. It's hard to believe that Pence didn't know about that at the time. And as we've seen, Pence is a chronological liar. His entire VP debate during the campaign against, Tim Kaine, he was just lying like again and again and again, and got called out for it the next morning with all these damning viral montages of all his lies. So this is a man who, is happy to lie. He does it so naturally. And so it's how much can we trust him that he didn't know how involved Mike Flynn was with the Russians and others around him. So Mike Pence might get pulled out as well, which would be a wonderful thing, because we certainly don't want him with his little his evangelical far right agenda, which is anti-women, anti-LGBT. We certainly don't want him leading the country. That would be a major danger to so many vulnerable groups.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, but that's the scary thing. I fear the Christian version of Iran that comes with a President Pence. So let's hope that.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, who knows what these guys are capable of, knowing that we have this blue wave that's coming for them. So who knows how they're going to react, what sort of desperate measures they're going to take. But we just have to keep fighting, and we have to keep pushing back and hit them back twice harder. And that's how these revolutions work, really. And America is very much in a revolutionary spirit. People are fighting. People are motivated. Big changes are happening. And the way you succeed against an enemy in a revolution is that no matter what they do to you, you just hit them back harder. That's what we saw repeatedly in the revolution in Ukraine, the pro-democracy movement, where everybody, from all walks of life came out against corruption. And, Paul Manafort was reported to do some of the ordering of the riot police to kill protesters. And, when protesters are being shot down, tortured, horrible images going viral, all that did was drive more people to come out to the square and show up and fight. No one backed down. And I think that's what we're seeing in our country. We were horrified by Charlottesville and Virginia. And now look what happened with Virginia. It's been completely taken over by Democrats now, it looks like. So, Americans just have to, when it gets very dark, when it gets very scary, that's the call to just keep fighting, keep organizing, and just hit them back harder.
There you go. Good advice. Andrea, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing your thoughts, keeping us up to date. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Take care, Rick.
Always great talking with you. Let's take a quick break. Right back. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is the Rick Smith Show.
90% of the wealth. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
Now a new climate report supports what scientists have said for years. The climate is changing, temperatures and sea levels are rising.
Green News Report special coverage. The comprehensive National Climate Assessment is out, with dire warnings on the impacts of climate change and hope that governments can act to reduce emissions.
Climate change is happening faster than we thought in some ways. It seems societally that maybe we're more vulnerable than we thought.
All of that fantastic news and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
If we can't talk about climate change, I guess it's finally time to have that gun control conversation we've been putting off, right?
This is your Green News Report.
Maybe if there's a hurricane made of guns, we'll finally get to have both of those talks.
Okay, Desi Doyen, after the President of the United States and all of his minions telling us that climate change doesn't really exist, the White House has now signed off on a report that finds that climate change exists and it's dire? What?
Yes, it is true. The White House did not interfere with the publication of the 4th National Climate Assessment that was released on Friday. It's congressionally mandated, a peer review report that comes out every 4 years, authored by hundreds of experts and scientists from 13 federal agencies, along with outside contributors. The report, as you mentioned, does indeed directly contradict the Trump administration's position on climate science.
And they signed off on it anyway.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
It's a dire assessment of the impact of climate change on the U.S. both today and in the future. The report explicitly states that if governments don't meet the emissions reductions targets that they have agreed to in the Paris Climate Agreement, and if we go beyond those emissions targets, then catastrophic impacts would be inevitable. The report's conclusions are not surprising, but they are grim. We are now living in the warmest period ever recorded in modern civilization. The scientists conclude that human activities, especially the emissions of greenhouse gases, are the primary cause of all of the warming observed since the 1950s. And there is, quote, no convincing alternative explanation that anything other than human activity is to blame for this unambiguous rise in temperatures. Everything from the cars we drive to the power plants we operate to the forests we destroy. The report notes that climate change impacts are already here, and that's with just a small increase in warming, and they're already creating more frequent extremes. Extreme rainfall events have increased. Higher temperatures are contributing to the rise in catastrophic wildfires and more frequent extreme heat waves. Warmer oceans are increasing sea levels and boosting damaging storm surge and flood events. Coastal cities in the U.S. are seeing 5 times as frequent coastal flooding as they did 50 years ago.
Wow, this does sound dire, though it sounds a hell of a lot like all of your Green News reports over the last 9 years.
Yes, well, thank you for noticing. The ocean absorbs about a third of humanity's carbon emissions, and that is altering its chemistry. The report finds that the rate of ocean acidification today is unmatched in at least 66 million years, and that it is already harming the U.S. shellfish industry and marine life at the base of the ocean food chain. Now, looking ahead, the real kicker in the report is the unknowns. The report says there is, quote, significant potential for unanticipated surprises. Things like compound events, multiple extreme climate events that occur simultaneously or in quick succession and overwhelm our society's ability to respond.
You mean like Hurricane Harvey, followed by Irma, followed by Maria, followed by wildfires out here in California?
Exactly. And they're also warning about tipping points where we push the climate system past some threshold or trigger self-reinforcing feedback loops that lead to even larger impacts, some of which may be abrupt and irreversible. Now, some impacts are baked in and unavoidable, according to the report, because of our failure to cut carbon emissions fast enough. We are locked into additional warming and extreme weather events and a lot of sea level rise, potentially as much as 3 to 8 feet by the end of the century. However, and this is important, all of the impacts over the next few decades and beyond depend entirely on the total amount of greenhouse gases we release globally. In an interview with PBS NewsHour, co-author of the report, Dr. Radley Horton of Columbia University, noted that because of the rapid growth of renewable energy worldwide and actions that nations are already taking, the window of opportunity is still open.
If we rapidly reduce our emissions, we're still going to get some more warming, but we can avoid those worst-case trajectories, and we can minimize the risk of what we call surprises that could lead to outcomes that are even worse than what the climate models have been telling us. If we reduce emissions, we reduce the risk of those kind of surprises.
So basically, because we caused it, we can also solve it.
That's optimistic. Have you seen us solve anything lately? For much more on that story and all of those that we couldn't get to thanks to the National Climate Assessment, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Trouble ahead, trouble behind. And you know that notion just crossed my mind.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. On October 20th, some 300 licensed practical nurses and certified nursing assistants at the Cedar Haven Healthcare Center took to the picket line as their employer, Stone Barn Holdings, imposed what they called their last best and final offer. Stone Barn Holdings purchased Cedar Haven back in 2004 from the county of Lebanon, Pennsylvania, for about $20.5 million. And now they're claiming, well, we need massive concessions and massive cuts because we're losing money. And here to talk about what's going on as the workers are on the picket line, I've got Steve Mullen. He's the director of AFSCME District Council 89 to come talk with us. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem, Rick. Thank you for having me on.
So as I remember this scenario, back in 2014, we were told that the privatization of this nursing home was going to be better for the taxpayers, better for the residents. It was going to be good for workers. How's that worked out?
Well, it hasn't worked out too good for the workers. And right now, since our members have been on strike, it hasn't been working out very well for the residents there either.
So on the 20th, you guys took to the picket lines. Was anyone surprised? Because as I understand, your last contract fight was very difficult as well.
Absolutely. The last contract that we had negotiated last year, the employees agreed to some pretty hefty concessions with regards to health care and with regards to paid time off. And, they really weren't expecting the employer to come back again this year and really, take an axe to their paid time off and their health care benefits once again.
Yeah, I look at this and it's
another one of these examples of privatization just failing. I mean, we were told back in 2014 this was going to be good for the residents, good for the taxpayers, good for the workers, and clearly it's not because, well, we got workers on the picket lines, you've got scabs not taking care of the residents, and well, you got turmoil.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in your discussions, they're claiming they're losing money, and the only way that they can possibly get any money to make up the difference is by taking it from the employees?
That's what they claim, yes.
Have there been any talks since? I mean, at some point there've got to be a coming together because, look, I look at these scab nursing organizations that come in, and they're really expensive. I can't imagine that it's less costly to sit down and negotiate than it would be to bring in these scabs. I can't imagine it would be any cheaper to bring the scabs in.
No, it isn't. In fact, to bring these scabs in, it's much more expensive. The fact that we haven't heard from the employer and the employer isn't willing to sit down and even talk with us about trying to resolve this, kind of leads us to believe that this is nothing more than a union busting tactic. He wants the union out, and this is his method for doing it.
Now, is there anything in the past in this Stone Barn Holdings that would lead you to believe that that's where the direction they're going is?
Just the his willingness to push as much as he can to take away as much as he can from these employees.
Now, you said a moment ago that, obviously the concessions and the cuts that they want now, and as I understand, they're talking about tripling the health care costs, taking more time, paid time away. You gave this stuff in the last contracts, right? A lot of paid time was lost, wage concessions, all of this stuff. It just seems to me that when's the end? When do they say the end is, or is it? Do you have to end up paying them to work there?
Now, as far as wage concessions go, in the last contract, we didn't, have any wage concessions, and in fact, I believe whenever we finally came to an agreement, there was a small pay increase for the employees, but most of the pay increases that he implemented was because he couldn't hire anybody at the rates that they were paying then.
Right.
And my understanding is that there's still a recruitment and retention problem there among staff, and this taking away all the employees' paid holidays, cutting them down to almost nothing in paid time off, meaning sick leave and vacation, and the drastic increase that the employees will have to pay in healthcare is just going to contribute to the recruitment and retention problem that already exists there.
Right. I look at this, and
again, you're talking about the most vulnerable in our society. You're talking about people who are, at the, in the golden years of their lives, don't have a lot of resources. And I look at a nursing home like Cedar Haven, which was a county home. The majority of the people get their care because of Medicaid. It just seems, again, this is another one of these kicking of the most vulnerable, at a time when they can really least afford it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the gouging of these employees' benefits and everything, again, is only going to exacerbate the already existing recruitment retention problem. But in the final analysis, what kind of employee are you going to get to work there who doesn't get any paid holidays, who gets 5 days off a year? That's combined sick and vacation leave, and can't really afford the healthcare insurance. I mean, what quality of employees are you going to get to work for those benefits and pay?
That's a good question, because at the end of this, I keep going back to the people that I met on the picket line when I was out there recently, who these are people who for
no way of putting it simpler, they love these people. These are almost like family that they take care of, and to have this kind of situation is heartbreaking to a lot of them that I spoke with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because in some cases the employees who are there are their only family. Some of these residents don't have any family, and even the ones that do have family look to these employees as family. I mean, they come in there. They take care of these people day in and day out, and they do it for not a lot of pay, not high quality benefits. They do it because they love these people and they love the work that they do. And sadly, the residents are suffering as much as what the employees are right now.
Sad stuff. Where do you see this going?
I mean, you're well into this strike. It's a lot longer than I had hoped it was going to be. What do you see going forward? How long do you think this is going to last?
I'm not sure how long it's going to last, but the employees are in it for the duration. They've been coming out every day in the rain, in the cold, and they're showing up in decent numbers, and they're very committed to doing this, because the bottom line is that most of them can't afford to continue working there under the contract that this employer imposed on them.
Sad
thing. And again, another one of these moments where I hate being right, but in 2014 when they privatized this, the writing was already on the wall. Steve, I appreciate you taking time.
I wish you and your members the best, and I'd love to have you come back and tell us what's going on as this continues.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Steve Mullen, Director of District Council 89 there of AFSCME. Quick break, right back. Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that Lemuel Rickett Boulware died. Boulware had a notorious reputation with labor leaders. He was the vice president for employee relations for General Electric during the 1950s. He took the lead on labor for the company in 1947, a year after a 17-week bitter strike at General Electric. Determined not to have another such strike, Boulware cultivated his own brand of labor relations. He advocated doing extensive research and offering what he called a fair, firm offer at the bargaining table. This meant the company would essentially give their final offer on the first day of bargaining and hold nothing back for future negotiations. This take-it-or-leave-it approach came to be known as Boulwareism. Other companies copied his tactic. Boulware came to be regarded as a master negotiator by corporate leaders. He was known for writing internal communications to GE employees with catchphrases advocating management's position on labor issues. In 1969, at the AFL-CIO convention in Atlantic City, Paul Jennings, the president of the Industrial Union of Electrical Workers, derided Boulware's tactics. Jennings described it as telling the workers what they're entitled to and trying to shove it down their throats. Boulware once described fair share unionism as wrong in principle and bad in practice. He is credited with helping to move Ronald Reagan to a more conservative approach to labor. Reagan went to work as a spokesperson for General Electric in 1954. At the time, Reagan had been a Democrat and also president of his union, the Screen Actors Guild. During his time at GE, he moved increasingly to the radical right, especially on labor issues. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. I'm Rick Smith.
From Seoul, South Korea, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. For the second consecutive day on his trip to Asia, President Trump boasted on Tuesday that South Korea would purchase military hardware from the U.S.
South Korea will be ordering billions of dollars of that equipment, which frankly for them makes a lot of sense. And for us, it means jobs. It means reducing our trade deficit.
But dig deeper into the announcements today, as well as yesterday in Japan, and the military purchases are actually either polished off old announcements or prospective deals too vague to nail down. Jonathan Miller is a senior fellow at the Japan Institute of International Affairs.
If you look at the way that he kind of framed the defense deals in both places, I mean, very similar language. I mean, I think it's kind of, some of it's a little bit aspirational or hopeful.
Hopeful indeed, because moments after Trump's remarks, South Korea's president took the mic and seemed more focused on signaling to China that buying arms from the U.S. wasn't such a big deal after all. Here was President Moon Jae-in through a translator.
So this is not about our stance vis-à-vis the United States and China. We are trying to bring a solution to the nuclear problem.
John Nilsson Wright, Senior Research Fellow for Asia at the British think tank Chatham House, says that as Trump's Asia visit wears on, he should prepare himself for less and less meaningful deals, especially when he heads to Beijing on Wednesday.
Is it going to get harder? Definitely it's going to get harder. Trump has invested a lot in getting the idea that the Chinese will deliver some real agreement that will put pressure on the North Koreans. Even the most optimistic sanctions are going to take a long time to have effect, months if not years.
The Trump administration may be heralding the president's trip as the most intensive U.S. diplomatic visit to Asia in a quarter century, but that doesn't mean the U.S. is the biggest fish in the pond. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. RickSmithShow.com. So, again, in Virginia, it looks like a massive victory for the Democrat Ralph Northam over Ed Gillespie, who was, a D.C. insider. Look, I mean, he was a guy who, honestly, truthfully, he's Mr. Inside the Beltway. And I find it interesting, ironic, bizarre, however you want to put it, that just 30 minutes after the election was called, Donald Trump tweeted out, Ed Gillespie worked hard, but did not embrace me. or what I stand for. He goes on to write, don't forget, Republicans won 4 out of 4 House seats, and with the economy doing record numbers, we will continue to win even bigger than before, even biglier than before. He didn't embrace me. Again, we have a president who it's about him, isn't it? It's really not about the party. It's not about the country. It's about him personally. He didn't embrace me. And the reality is, if you watched this race, and I did, Gillespie did embrace Trump's policies, especially on immigration and crime and being, just your basic racist. I'm really stuck at this moment where it's all about him. It's really just all about him. Amazing stuff. Anyway, the Club for Growth. You may remember Pat Toomey, senator from Pennsylvania, was the head of the Club for Growth for a while. The current Club for Growth president not thrilled with the Republican tax plan. David McIntosh, the president there of the big club, a club that you and I obviously are not in. He says that he's critical of the plan. He's taking issue with several parts of it. He said, quote, while the corporate tax cut will lead to some increase in our nation's GDP, the rest of the provisions on individual taxpayers fail the pro-growth test. They are opposed to it. He says, all in all, this bill must be changed if Republicans intend to keep their promise of real pro-growth, job-creating tax cuts. He says he's against it because it's class war. It's class warfare. It's class warfare because and again, you go back to this moment, he's against the fact that you have a top marginal tax rates for people making over $1 million a year. Believes should be wiped away. He said, quote, House Republicans are engaging in class warfare, the likes of which would make Democrats green with envy. He's angry at what they liken as the bubble tax, which is on taxes on people who make between $1 million and $1.2 million to be able to claw back some of the 12% marginal rate, claw some of that back. He also is critical of the protections on the pass-through businesses, thinks that should be happening, and wants the death tax eliminated immediately because, those estates over, $5.5 million for an individual, $11 million for a couple, just too high. In fact, it should go right away. Why wait? Just do away with it. And you look at this and you go, maybe there's hope that it's not going to pass. Maybe with these kind of moneyed interests, maybe we'll see. And some other good news tonight out of the state of Maine. Maine has passed a referendum to expand Medicaid to, I guess, something like 70,000 people in the state of Maine. And this is a major blowback, a major slap in the face to Paul LePage, who is on the record saying basically, we're never going to do it. It's never going to happen. This is a big win there. What'll be interesting to see, while, the voters have said they want it, it'll be interesting to see how long it takes LePage to actually go forth with what the people have demanded. And also in Virginia, not only do you have a Democratic governor and lieutenant governor, you have just Democrats romping through the House of Delegates. So it will be interesting to see what happens. It looks like Virginia could be the next state to pass Medicaid expansion, especially at a time where you're going to have the Trumpkins and the Republicans doing everything they can to destroy it. The will of the people be damned. Sad stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Last little bit, the iPhone X camera is getting people all upset, evidently making us a little self-conscious, maybe we didn't realize we're as ugly as we really are. That's been the Twitter meme the entire time. I'm going, really? The camera is so good that you see the blemish and you're mad about that? What is wrong with us? Again, first world problem. I saw that I had to bring it up. It's just one of those things. Anyway, if you missed any of tonight's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots to get to tomorrow. Cannot wait. Oh, I forgot. Bill de Blasio won big in New York City. So there. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide flood beneath